Greetings. I'm Natalie King, current chair of the Multicultural Education Special Interest Group for the Association of Teacher Educators. 2020 is a special year because it is the centennial celebration of ATE. ATE's vision is to promote advocacy, equity, leadership, and professionalism for teacher educators in all settings and to support quality education for all learners at all levels. As we reflect on the history of ATE, I'd like for us to pay close attention to the evolution of the multicultural education SIG, because in order for us to have 2020 vision, we must pause to reflect on our past. I had the unique privilege of interviewing Dr. Ross Duhon-Sells, Dr. H. Prentice Baptiste, and Dr. Gooden for this short documentary. They were active during the inaugural years of the Multicultural Education SIG and through the first decade of its existence. They are also some of the founding members of the National Association for Multicultural Education that was birthed out of the Multicultural Education SIG. Now, that's history. I'm so delighted that they agreed to share some of their stories regarding the successes and challenges of the Multicultural Education SIG and ATE organization. We are truly grateful for trailblazers who forged a path forward for multicultural education, diversity, equity, inclusivity, and social justice in our professional organizations. Please join us on this journey of preserving the history and identity of the Multicultural Education SIG.
My second year in higher ed, a colleague of mine was talking about the Association of Teacher Educators, and we submitted a paper. And the paper was accepted for us to present. And we did, and that was the beginning. I was working at McNeese State University. I was the first African-American professor. You know what goes along with that. But I was blessed to have some outstanding administrators. And the dean was just a super supportive woman at McNeese. And in the early 80s, the university had funds. And so anytime we submitted a paper was accepted, the institution paid our expense to go. So that was a major blessing. That was a good thing.
I'm H. Prentice Baptiste. I guess my emphasis is really in terms of multicultural education along with science education.
Good morning and hello to each of you. I am Cherry Ross Gooden. I am a retired faculty member from Texas Southern University, and I'm happy to be able to share with those of you who will be watching this interview.
Because of the timing, and I guess you would say in terms of coming out of the 60s and the 70s, there was a strong movement toward multicultural education at that time. And although we were members of ATE, we noticed that there was something missing, a focus on the arena of multicultural education, dealing with racism, dealing with ethnic kinds of concerns that we had. And that was not a part of what we had observed in terms of the presentations, etc. And so that's what led myself and Jim and several others to say we needed to have a SIG that was focusing on multicultural education.
James Anderson had discussions when we were at the ATE meetings, and his discussions were focused on starting a special interest group for multicultural education, because at the time multicultural education was really growing, and because of the diversity in the schools, it was so necessary. And his discussions end up in being allowed to start a special interest group on multicultural education. And I was part of that, and part of the group that started that. James Anderson, Prentice Baptiste, Cherry Gooden, Marjorie Kyle, Glenn Dotson, several other people. But we're talking about a long time ago now. We're talking about early 80s.
Dr. James Anderson, at that time, became the first chair of the multicultural SIG group. And he served in that position for 3 years. That was in the 80s. I became the second chair of the group for 2 years, of the SIG group. This was followed by Dr. Rose Duhon-Sells.
I ended up working toward being the chairperson of the SIG, but I wasn't elected. And then the next year, I developed a program, a separate program for the SIG, which I had to get approved by the board for ATE. And that's how I got really involved.
So I became involved as a doctoral student because my major professors were heavily involved. Following along with that, my commitment as a teacher educator, but also as a multicultural educator, was blossomed and was supported in the ATE multicultural education SIG. And the early years, Prentice, what was very important about the SIG, the opportunity for African American professionals to be on program. You know, your ATE proposal didn't get accepted often.
Right.
So the SIG
group
program gave those voices a chance to be heard.
Well, one of the major successes for me was having the opportunity to present my research, because I did a lot of research in that. And I also had the opportunity to meet research scholars in the field. And when I was teaching multicultural education, that was my specialty. So I was using the work of Geneva Gay, James Banks, Carl Grant, and that group. So that was a major plus for me.
What I like about the SIG is that it has expanded its membership in terms of diversity, in terms that it represents a number of ethnic and cultural groups, as opposed to when we got it started at that time. In the very beginning, the structure was more or less, we had a chairperson to a great extent. We did not have a lot of infrastructure that I know exists today for the SIG group. We had majorly a chair.
And secretary. I was the first secretary.
You were secretary. Okay, glad you remember that. Right. We had for a while a paper.
We did.
We did have a paper newsletter that was printed and mailed to the membership at that time. Yes, we had a program.
We always had a speaker. We always try to bring in a speaker and maybe a presentation. And then we had business meetings, because we would have structured business meetings for the membership, and we met 2 days. We had
we had one meeting that was a general meeting, and then we had another meeting usually the day afterwards or something, in terms of that business kind of
a business meeting.
Right.
I mean, we had outstanding speakers.
Oh, yes.
But we had the best SIG reception of all ATE. And it grew, so we actually, people were coming from all over. That's where they came, particularly African American educators. So there was networking that took place, that kind of informal mentoring.
Right.
And people, they started looking forward. When is the multicultural SIG reception? An answer. But the networking
was perhaps one of the most important aspects of that particular SIG.
Well, we are talking about the very early 80s, like 81, 82. It almost seemed as though African American educators were invisible. And I spoke a group of African American educators said, Rose, we feel invisible. The president passes us on the hallway and totally ignores us. So I asked her for an audience. And I can't remember the lady's name, but she was very, very kind. And she said, oh, okay. I said, give me a time that we could sit down and talk with you. And she met with us, and I told her what my colleagues were telling me, and she said, that is unintentional. She said, we cannot have that. And we told her the complaints and stuff we were having, because even when we first started, the issue I had was we were assigned a room to meet. But by the end of the conference, by the time we met, that room had changed 2 or 3 times. And I couldn't deal with that, because people would come and look in the book and they spent time searching for us. I was uncomfortable with that.
My membership of ATE was never really that I decided not to become a member of ATE or not to renew it. The challenge, I always felt like ATE was not as receptive to the kinds of concerns that we had in terms of multicultural education. That was not, as far as I could determine, a real way of saying we're going to support the multicultural concerns and principles, etc.
We were meeting, as I said, I was chairperson of the SIG after Prentice Baptiste. And that conference, they moved that meeting 5 times. And the last move was in a bar. And when the SIG was trying to meet in the bar, it was smoky, it was still, the stench was so strong, we could barely breathe.
The challenge, I guess, was the major challenge, was that the SIG group felt like there was no support. So I have to say that challenge led to the beginning of name, the origination name, which is kind of a good thing.
Yeah. I said, there is a need for a national organization for multicultural education. And I said, nobody's going to start it if we don't start it. Everybody totally agreed with me. When we left that meeting, the next ATE meeting was in Las Vegas. And my husband, we were dating then, Dr. Halloway Charles Sells. He said, are you serious about starting a national organization? I said, yes, I am. He says, okay, it's 6 o'clock now. Call all of the people who are part of your SIG and ask them to meet with you in your room at 8 o'clock. I said, I don't know if I can do that. I said, we had a long night last night. I said, but I can try. He said, no, don't try, do it. And he said, ask everybody to pay $50. And that's how you can start the organization. I called about maybe 15, 20 people. Well, we had 8 people at 8 o'clock, and they came to the room. And I told them, I said, look, there's an urgency for our children, for us, to start a national organization. Very few of these 8 people returned my calls because they knew what I wanted. But one particular person answered every phone call. And I called Pritchett and I said, Pritchett, I said, I want to start this organization. I said, what am I going to do? He said, Rose, look. He said, Rose, I don't have any money. But he said, I'll work with you and I'll write anything you need. I said, Pritchett, I don't have any money either, and I'm a single parent with 4 children. I said, however, I have a credit card, and I'll take the risk. He said, okay. At the end of the year, I had $20,000 of charges on my credit card. And I had a $5,000 limit. But long story short, our first conference, I had $20,000 charges on my credit card, and we made $27,000.
We use that SIG to groom scholars of color who are now out, have been in the work and have done great things. I think we established a kind of friendship, collegial friendships that went beyond the conference, and we got Rose elected as the second.
It sure did.
Second and first black female.
I think so,
to
in
be
terms of that.
president.
I was asked to run to become president of ATE. When I was asked to be president of ATE, the colleague that asked me, I said to her, wait a minute now, why do you think they would elect me as an African American woman to be president, and you've never had an African American before? And she said to me, Rose, go on and run. Put your name in to run. Get your information together, and I'm going to help you, and let's do it. I said, okay. So we put the information in, and I ran. And I experienced a lot of discrimination, quite a bit. The first thing was, heretofore, the president-elect would travel with the director. Now, he and the president-elect would go to the site, to tour the hotel and make the decision. Well, that didn't occur for me. I was president-elect. He took the president-elect. When I was going to the hotel where the conference was being held, the driver of the car that picked me up, my husband and I at the airport, he said, oh, you may want to freshen up your makeup because there will be an entourage, a welcoming entourage waiting for you at the hotel. Said, I'm not going to waste my makeup because no one will be there to welcome me. He said, oh, no, you're absolutely right. I've been doing this for years, I know. And I said, I've been black for more years, I know. Needless to say, when I got to the hotel, no one was there to welcome me. The pressure, the discrimination, and all the things I endured, by the time I won for president, and I guess it was stress coming from a lot of different places, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I made sure NAME's conference was in the same city as ATE because I was wise enough to know universities were not going to give money to faculty to go to a brand new organization. But if they had money to go to ATE, they could go across town to NAME and pay a small registration fee for NAME. That's how we got started. But when I was diagnosed with cancer and became president of ATE, the word got out, how I don't know, that I was doing this. So ATE put the word out that they were meeting in Detroit. Needless to say, I planned NAME in Detroit. But guess where they were meeting? Atlanta. NAME, in its fourth or fifth year, had more attendees that year than ATE. I started NAME in 90, and I stayed with ATE until 95. I put a lot of resources into NAME and made sure name not only would move forward, but prosper. So it just became too expensive.
One of the things that I have noticed and have felt was a good thing is that the umbrella of multicultural education has really become an umbrella for a lot of different concerns of different groups, because we all have those social inequities that we're dealing with. And to me, that's one of the positives of multicultural education. It allows that, it points that out. It was my wish back there in the 70s when I was doing that, in the 80s, was that I wouldn't have to teach that course any longer. However, unfortunately, that transition hasn't taken place.
Let me just add one of the things as I look at scholars who are coming along. I really hope that in the work that you do, you stay true to the cause. I hope
Good point.
that the scholars now, that you will not be dissuaded from what you're doing in order to meet some artificial, somebody else's standard.
Political agenda.
That they don't sell, or you all don't sell who you are for selfish reasons.
And I think multicultural education is so important today because you have a different kind of discrimination today. And the discrimination we're looking at today is against poor people and black, white, Hispanic, Mexican, all these different races. No matter what's your race, if you are poverty-stricken or if you are disadvantaged, you are discriminated against. Multicultural education is needed more today because multicultural education helps not only the teacher to understand her students in a diverse classroom environment, but it also helps the students to learn and open their little minds and do so much better with a teacher who understands them.
The purpose of the Multicultural Education Special Interest Group is to establish within the organizational structure of the Association of Teacher Educators an ongoing forum dedicated to the generation, dissemination, and critique of scholarship that informs curricular and pedagogical thought, practice, and policy in relation to social justice and teacher education. Our scope encompasses K-12 schools, undergraduate and graduate programs, and community agencies. Multicultural education is interpreted as advocating for equity across and at the intersections of race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexuality, spirituality, exceptionality, nationality, immigrant refugee status, and language.